What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero back with another Yata format video, and this one's going to be pretty fun as I'm taking a look at a popular GOAT format deck and seeing if it actually works in Yata. And that deck, of course, is GOAT Control. Now, in GOAT format, GOAT Control is basically using Metamorphosis to bring out a Thousand Eyes Restrict off of something like a Sinister Serpent or a Scapegoat token, and then using something like Tsukuyomi, which can flip it back down repeatedly, to basically set up this lock where you're constantly sucking up your opponent's monsters with Thousand Eyes Restrict, and also you're able to get in for damage with Tsukuyomi. Now, there's a lot more to the deck than that, and, we'll explore that when I get to GOAT format. But that's the basic gist of the deck and the main combo that makes it so threatening. And, you can't really do that in Yata format since you don't actually have access to Tsukuyomi, as that would come out later in the game's history. So we got to make do with what we can. We do have access to 3 Metamorphosis, though, to get us into the combo, which is nice. We also have a Sinister Serpent here, which is a level 1 monster that you can tribute off Metamorphosis to bring out a Thousand Eyes Restrict. However, you will notice that I'm playing some very interesting choices here to sort of accommodate for the lack of Tsukuyomi. Firstly, we don't actually have the scapegoats, and the reason for that is you're not necessarily always going to go into the Thousand Eyes Restrict because you don't have Tsukuyomi, so it's not necessarily your most powerful option a lot of the time. So I figured that the scapegoats would, it's a nice card for like defense, and also does let you get out a Thousand Eyes Restrict. I figured it wasn't strictly necessary, especially given that Sinister Serpent is very searchable off of Sangan and Witch. We also are playing 3 Mystic Tomato to bring out your Sangan and Witch. So I figured that, Sinister Serpent wasn't the most necessary, or not Sinister Serpent, the Scapegoat wasn't the most necessary card here, because you've got so many ways to access Sinister Serpent. Sinister Serpent definitely is a necessary card in this deck if you want to make it work. So I pivoted away from just focusing entirely on the GOAT aspect of GOAT Control, and I looked towards other uses for Metamorphosis, as one of the ways to get rid of Thousand Eyes Restrict is to actually just use tribute monsters and tribute over it for something like an Air Knight Parshath, a Dark Ruler Hades, or a Jinzo, all of which have very good Metamorphosis targets, in the form of Ryu Senshi, which is a monster that can negate normal trap cards, and also it negates spell effects that target it, which, in this format aren't as many or as bad as in other formats. For instance, like Raigeki and Dark Hole exist, so that can clear Senshi that way. But it will stop things like Change of Heart, Raigeki, or not Raigeki, Change of Heart or Snatch Steal. That's it. Man, I'm stumbling over my words today. But yeah, so that's a very good target that you can go into. For the level 6s, we also have a bit of a spicy package in the form of Super Robo Lady and Super Robo Yara. I don't think that this will ever be the choice to go into off of a level 6, but it is kind of funny, so I did include it here for edge cases. The 5s are actually very interesting off of Parshath. We've got 2 Dark Balter, the Terrible, which is a very, very good card. Arguably the best fusion monster you can bring out. This negates normal spells, which is really big this format, given how many powerful normal spells there are. And also the effects of effect monsters destroyed by this card as a result of battle are negated, which is extremely, extremely strong. So Dark Balter is probably your most powerful fusion monster here, but I didn't really feel good playing more than one Parshath. Maybe in the future people will. But Parshath is kind of an underpowered tribute monster in this format. There are still things like Gemini Elf and Bazoo that people are playing that can get over this pretty easily. And also, not many people are playing Scapegoat, so it gets less value there. And it can be a bit dead in your hand. But I do think that it's a pretty good card, and that's why we are playing it. It just isn't necessarily the best card. Maybe in the future people will side in, or not side in, but just replace it entirely with things like Lesser Fiend, which can negate your opponent's monster effects if there's things like Mystic Tomato, Sangan, or Witch. And did see relative success in the recent Yata tournament that was held in Ellie Tin Can's Fiend deck. So maybe this card will get replaced in the future. For now, I have it here. It's also sort of more relevant in GOAT format, so I figured if we're playing a GOAT format deck, it's kind of fun to have that here. But Hades and Jinzo are your best tribute monsters here, and just being able to have a tribute monster to summon over a Thousand Eyes Restrict to shut it off on your turn is very, very nice, and one of the few ways you actually have to deal with that. Now, you could also play things like Book of Moon to deal with Thousand Eyes Restrict. I don't necessarily think that this is the best, as it's a very temporary measure, and basically you're just using it for one removal, because the only reason you really do this is if you want to suck up another of your opponent's monsters. So you'd book your own Restrict, flip up the Restrict, take control of your opponent's monster, and that's fine, but it's just like not the best. So I don't really think that combo is worth it, but it is something you can do to shut it off. Now, for the other monsters here, we're largely playing just good stuff. We've got an Exiled Force at Fiber Jar. We actually have 3 Spy because this pairs well with our Tribute monsters, bringing out more Tribute fodder on field, deck thinning, and also just being a monster that's very hard for your opponent to get over. So I think this card is very good in this deck. We've also got an Injection Fairy Lily to just deal a ton of damage out of nowhere. We got the 3 Tomato, the Sangan, the Witch that I mentioned earlier. We've also got a Spirit Reaper to bring out off of the Tomato, also just to get in hand rips there. Also the level 3, just mixing up the levels a bit more, because we do have some other like leveled fusion monsters in our deck. We have Dragoness the Wicked Knight, which is the strongest attack on level 3, and Darkfire Dragon, which is the strongest attack on a level 4 at this time. The last fusion monster in our extra deck is the Last Warrior from Another Planet, which is just in the edge case where your opponent does play a level 7 monster and you potentially take control of it. That can actually come up occasionally, so we do have it here. You could potentially play level 7 monsters of your own in this deck. You could also turn this into more of like a Reasoning Gate sort of deck, except without the gate. Just playing Reasoning, a bunch of big monsters in your deck to bring out and then potentially meta into things. I think this is like a bit too clunky, and deck space is already tight enough, so I didn't really feel the need to go that way. But if you do go that way, then the Last Warrior is a much better potential option there. Also, I don't think I mentioned, but there are 2 other level 5 targets, Fiend Skull Dragon, which isn't really as useful as Dark Vulture, but there's also Reaper on the Nightmare, which can come up in edge cases. So these are also good to know about if you're playing this deck. And the last monster in the deck is Yata. Namesake of the format, you can potentially get in some hand loops here, or not hand loops, but just draw locks, and shutting off your opponent from being able to draw into other outs. Maybe not the best option here, but if you are playing tribute monsters that can be annoying for your opponent to deal with, then you could potentially wind up in a situation where they don't have outs to your tribute monsters, they set a monster, and then you bring out Yata in addition to your tribute monster, hit in with the tribute monster, then hit in with Yata, and potentially lock them out that way. So that's why I have it in the deck. Maybe not a main deck inclusion in future iterations, but I do think it's pretty decent here. For the spells, we've got just a who's who of powerful spells with the format: Change of Heart, Confiscation, Darkhold, Delinquent Duo, Graceful Charity, Harpy's Feather Duster, Triple Metamorphosis, as this card is at 3 this format, Mirage of Nightmare, Monster Reborn, Triple MST, Painful Choice, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, Snatch Steal, and Forceful Sentry. All just incredibly, incredibly powerful spells. We've also got a Call of the Haunted, Imperial Order, Mirror Force, and Ring of Destruction for our trap lineup, all of which are incredibly powerful one-of traps. For the side deck, it's kind of a hodgepodge. I've got Bazoo and Kaiku here in case we need to get a bit more aggressive with our beaters, and Kaiku does have edge cases against like maybe the Fiend deck if they're playing Necrofear, and also just hitting a Serpent out of grave, which can be nice. We're also playing 2 Magician of Faith. I didn't elect to include this in the main deck here, although you definitely could use it as another target for 1000 Restrict off of Metamorphosis, and also just a good way to get spells back from grave. But deck space was tight, as I mentioned, and I feel like the other monsters all do a better job here. Maybe you could swap out like a Yata or something in the future for a Faith, but I think Faith is fine in the side deck. We also got a Heavy Storm and Dust Tornado for backer removal, 2 Noblemen of Crossout and Ceasefire for decks that are more flip focused, triple Scapegoat in case you're up against a bit more of an aggressive deck, although this definitely does have its flaws, as you may see in some of the games. And we've got a triple Torrential Tribute package to round out the list. This is also good against much more aggressive decks, where you just want to deprive the monsters on field. So that will do it for the deck breakdown. I think this deck is really neat, and I don't think that my list is by any means optimal. Not sure if through more experimentation this deck may become like tier 1, but it definitely is probably a tier 2 contender for sure. And I think it's really fun to play. So let's just dive into some games and show you how this deck actually performs. Okay, we got a lot of games to get through here as I tested out this deck a fair bit, both in ranked play and also in non-ranked play. So let's just dive into the games right away. We're facing Paolo NS, who is a very good duelist in a variety of formats. They've actually managed to win some past formats. I think in Critter format, I think they won the last tournament in that. So yeah, they're very good duelists. Here I make a bit of a misplay, I think. Well, the beginning of this isn't a misplay. I think we go for Graceful here. We could have potentially set Witch to get Serpent to hand and then gone for Graceful next turn. But I feel like it's fine just firing it now. We don't necessarily need to do that, and Witch can get us something good later. But this is a very, very good hand here. We're going to discard a Harpies and an MST here. And then we're going to make a bit of a misplay, I think. We're just setting Fiber Jar. I don't think we need to do this. We've got Duo to potentially put on pressure to their hand. We got Witch to search out something good. We've also got Mirror Force and Ring to act as very good trap cards here. and Lily to press for more damage. I think what we should have done here is just set the Witch, save the Fiber Jar for later if things do take a turn for the worst. But Witch is just good to help us search out more things from our deck and potentially get in for a lot of damage before we Fiber Jar. And that is a very important thing to do before you Fiber Jar. You do want to be a bit ahead on damage. But we're going to go for the Fiber Jar play, I think partially because we figure our opponent won't be expecting it. And then we're just going to set a ring, set a duo, pass back to our opponent. We don't want to fire the duo if we are going to go for the Fiber Jar play here, because we don't want to drop our life points down low. So I think maybe this was okay, but I think my actions on the following turns make it a bit worse than it would have been. So we draw Pot of Greed, so we might as well fire it before we go for the Fiber Jar, and our opponent will fire in Imperial Order. We go for the Fiber Jar here, and that will indeed go through. So everything will get shuffled back into the deck. And, I mean, who knows if this would have been correct or not. But, yeah, I feel like we probably should have played this a bit differently. But anyways, that will go through. We draw Yata, so that's actually pretty nice. So this Fiber Jar might actually end up rewarding us here. We're going to go for Coffee just to see what they've got, to see if we want to commit to the Yata lock. But unfortunately, their hand is really stacked. And this will prevent us from actually making the most use of our Yata. So we're going to get rid of the Reborn because if we take a monster, they can Reborn it back. But yeah, this is pretty awkward for us here. We're just going to set a Sangan, set a ring, pass back to them. They're likely going to just MST that. But if they don't, then we can use it on the Gearfried. They're going to go for Duo here, just dumping our hand. We knew that was coming. There wasn't really any way we could avoid that. I guess if we had Yata'd, maybe we'd have some choice over what we discard. But yeah, I think that this was probably just the best play here. They're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Forceful Sentry, so that's very good for us. We're going to just hit in with Sangan, set the Forceful first, because if they did happen to draw like Morphing Jar off the top, then we don't want a Forceful now. We want to wait till after. But if it's Sangan, we also just want to hit into it now, get them to have the search, and then Forceful back, whatever they potentially search here. They're going to go for Exile, and we main 2 just go for the Forceful. That will indeed go through. And we see that they've got a Harpies. That was the draw for last turn. Got Harpies exiled in Gearfried here. It's a bit tricky, but we do take the Gearfried because the exiled can't really profitably clear the Sangan. So we figure, you know, if they don't draw a monster next turn, the exiled is going to be really awkward here because they'll either have to crash with the Sangan, we get a search, or they're going to have to, you know, just set the exiled, which isn't the best for them. They could also just hold it. And that is probably what they do if they don't draw a monster. So maybe it wasn't the best to just send back the Gearfried, especially because we do have the ring for the Gearfried. But we also know that they have an MST, and seeing that they've got a Harpies as well, we figure that they're more inclined to actually just clear away our back row before making a push. So I think it's probably better just to do this. Unfortunately, they draw Rhoda, which will get them back the Gearfried, and now we're kind of in the same spot as before. Now, as a note, we would have kind of been in this situation either way because they could have Rhoda back the Exiled Force, but it didn't really matter here. We draw Duo, which isn't the best here, but we're going to Exiled Force away that Gearfried, set the Duo trying to bait the MST, because Duo is as a 1-for-1 trade isn't necessarily the best. Maybe we should just Duo'd away the Exile just to prevent them from being able to clear whatever monster we bring out later. I think this is ultimately fine. Our opponent's just going to bring out the Exiled, hit in for 1,000, and if we draw a monster to clear that, that will be very nice. They draw Mirage, though. Ooh, that's going to be really rough. We draw Tomato, so we won't be able to clear that Mirage. We just got to hope that they don't actually draw something to clear the Mirage themselves. We're going to bring out the Tomato, hit over the Exiled there, deal 400, and pass back to them. It looks like they will not draw something to out the Mirage, so we feel very good about that. They're going to pitch 4. Unfortunately, we do see that they drew a Serpent, so they'll be able to add that to hand after the Mirage. So that's kind of rough for us. They're going to set 2 pass. They get to draw 4 here, which is very unfortunate. We do figure that they don't have an MSC set on field, but, you know, that doesn't really tell us much. We're going to think about exactly what to do here. We could get a bit aggressive summoning out the Tomato and trying to just get a clock on them, but it's a very small clock, and they haven't used up any of their power traps yet. So I feel like we honestly should just, you know, play it safe. Switch the Tomato to defense. We know that they've got the Serpent set anyways, so we don't really want to give them that in hand to pitch off the Mirage. So I feel like this is fine. It looks like they still don't have an out to the Mirage, so we feel very good about that. They're just going to pitch a bunch of good cards here and then set 1 pass back to us. Raigeki isn't really the best into a known, you know, Serpent. But now we could potentially get a bit more aggressive here. And we're going to think about whether we actually want to do that. We do know Mirror Force is gone. But I don't think we actually want to get super aggressive here. Because, again, we don't want to add them back the Serpent to hand. And, like, while Mirror Force is gone, TT is definitely not gone. So we don't want to play into Torrential. So we set the Raigeki here. And then because also we figure if they draw an MST, they're going to use it on the Mirage. So we don't really have to worry about that. But yeah, it looks like they still don't have an out to that Mirage. They're going to pitch 4 good ones. So we're feeling very good about this. Opponent's getting pretty low on cards in deck. And also, it's getting kind of rough for them. They're going to hit in to the Mystic Tomato. And then they're actually going to, in Battle Step, fire a ring on our Tomato. This is really smart. It plays around Mirror Force. And now they'll be able to get in for a ton of damage here. And also banish some monsters from our graveyard, which is kind of unfortunate for us. We draw a Spy, which is really nice. We could just set the Spy, but we do see that in Grave, they still have a Raigeki left in deck, so we don't necessarily want to just risk losing out of nowhere here. So I think it actually might be time to fire the Raigeki here, and we will indeed do that. Firing that Raigeki, setting the Spy, passing back to them. They will add back the Serpent, which we did know about, which is kind of unfortunate. And oh, they still do not have an out to the Mirage, which is very nice for us. They'll be able to add back that Serpent, unfortunately. But yeah, okay, that's the Raigeki gone. Nice to see that. So we could have definitely lost here if we didn't Raigeki beforehand. They're going to go for a Graceful, pitching that Serpent and an MST, kind of worrying that they pitched the MST because it means that they might be trying to wrap things up this turn because they don't need to worry about getting rid of the Mirage for next turn. They're going to bring out a Gear Free to Fire Knock, get rid of our monsters here. The good thing about Gear Free, they won't be able to use Blast with Chain to buff it up a little bit more to get in for lethal. So that's nice. But it is a bit worrying that they went for this. And in standby phase or draw phase, whichever one, they're going to fire Ceasefire, and that will indeed be the end of the game. So, we did lose this one. We didn't really get to show off any of the, goat control part of the deck, which can happen. Meta is unsearchable, so no real way to show that off if we don't draw it. But yeah, that was a pretty good showing for our opponent. I think if we had just kept the hand that we had and not gone for the fiber play, maybe things would have gone a little bit differently for us. But who's to say? It's tough to sort of trace back that far in time. And I think we did get a pretty decent hand there afterwards anyways. So not the worst for us. We are going to go into game 2 and hope that we can actually get a win off this deck. Because our opponent still doesn't know what we're playing, and now we know what they're playing. So we side in Torrential because they're on a bit more of an aggressive deck, a warrior deck. So I feel like the TTs are pretty good here. I think I also might have sided out the Spies, maybe. I think I sided out a Reaper for sure, because Reaper into Blast with Chain is not the best. But yeah, I think I wrote this down at the time, but it's been a while since I actually played these games, so I don't actually have that anymore. But we're going to go for Duo first and then Fire Sentry. I know that people debate back and forth on this. I sort of go based off of, you want to get the most hand knowledge possible, and you also want to get sort of the pick of the crop after you've gone for a Delinquent Duo play there. Of course, if your opponent has Serpent, then the Duo is a lot worse there, and so that's the risk here. But you'd have to open Serpent, which doesn't always happen. And also, if you Forceful back the Serpent, you're kind of using your Forceful on that anyways. So, it's kind of rough. I mean, I guess you do have perfect hand knowledge afterwards, so maybe the perfect hand knowledge is fine enough. But I kind of prefer it this way. You can definitely do it the other way, though. And yeah, I could definitely be convinced in the future as well that this is the correct order for Sentry, then Duo. But that's sort of my reasoning behind it. Anyways, we're going to fire that Sentry, look at their hand, see that they've got Duo, MST, and Zayluke here. And we're actually going to just send back the Zayluke because now they have no monsters in hand. And also, if we set our entire thing, then they won't really have a good Duo. We choose to just set 3 because we figure that, if they do use the Duo here, they're paying 1,000 to trade 1 for 1, and they might just go for it knowing that we're going to play around it for the rest of the game anyways. But also, if they draw Harpies, this forces them to use the Duo to clear our last remaining card in hand. So I feel like this is playing a bit better into Harpies than just setting all 4 would be. So I feel like this is fine. Our opponent is just going to go for the 1 for 1 trade on Duo. I think that makes sense. And they're just going to set 2 and pass. We draw Gravekeepers Spy. We could just summon that out and get hitting in. But I choose to set it instead. Our opponent's going to bring out a Wanghu here and hit in to our Spy. And, we could have TT'd this because Wanghu is annoying, but we do have the Raigeki to clear it anyways. So they're going to hit in to the Spy. It is a mandatory effect, so I will indeed have to bring out a Spy here. So we'll get sent to Grave. And yeah, Mirage is a pretty great card here. We're just going to fire the Mirage, pass back to them. We don't really want to commit to the Raigeki now because they don't have a way to actually clear the Spy. maybe I should have just gone for the Raigeki, then gone for an MST, just trying to hit the MST in their back row to make this Mirage more alive. But I think this was fine. And they're going to have to use MST here to clear the Mirage. And I feel like we're in a pretty good spot. Parshath is pretty good. We'll be able to summon that out, hit over the Wanghu, and we're just going to get rid of that back row just in case. It was a call, so I feel pretty good about that. This was a bit risky knowing that they do have Blast, so maybe I should have ordered this a bit differently. But if they had Blast either way, we were kind of screwed here because, we'd bring up Parshath, hit into Wanghu, they'd activate in damage step, and then we couldn't chain MST. We could have gone for Raigeki to avoid that sort of circumstance, but I feel like I want to save the Raigeki for later. Anyways, we're going to tribute out this Parshath and then hit over that Wanghu. Set this ring, pass back to them. We know that they don't really have much monster pressure, and they likely don't have a Harpies, or they would have fired it earlier. So I figure if they draw Harpies off the top, we're in kind of a rough spot, but, we still got the Parshath to just keep hitting in here. They're going to set one. We're going to bring out Reaper, and we feel really good about this board state. We're going to hit over their set. It's a Reaper of their own, so we won't get to hit in with our Reaper, but we do have this ring, so we will be able to pop their Reaper and hit in with our Reaper anyways. So we feel really good here. And Yata is a very good card to clear, just in case. They're going to set one, pass back to us, and, I mean, this is just pretty close to the end of the game. We don't really want to play into TT, and we feel very, very good here. We're just going to attack in with Parshath, then set the Sangan main phase 2, pass back to them. They are on a bit of a clock here either way. They're going to reborn back this Spy. That's fine by us. And they're just going to pass back to us. We're going to flip up the Sangan here and see if they've got TT. It looks like they don't, or they're not going to fire it here. We've got Raigeki. They've got IO, so that will prevent our Raigeki from going through. But this does put them on a bit of a clock because they have to pay 700 if they want to keep IO active. It looks like they are indeed going to do that. So I feel very good about this. We can just switch the Sangan to defense here. We don't have to really do anything. And we are just going to commit a tomato to field. It doesn't really matter. I think maybe we shouldn't have done this, but the way I figured it is we've got IO, so if they do have a board clear, it won't actually matter here either way. So they're going to let the IO lapse, just hit into our set with the Spy, just to see what it is, get more information. But that will indeed be the end of the game there. So very, very good game 2, I think, for the deck, but I'm not sure if we can really credit that to the deck or if we can credit that to the hands, as we didn't really get to see the meta cards in play. So let's hope in game 3 we can actually do that. But seeing Wanghu, we definitely don't want to bring in a Scapegoat because Wanghu eats that card alive. And honestly, we might want to side out sort of our meta package because Wanghu or Thousand Eyes Restrict into Wanghu is pretty rough. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Meta still deals with, if we have Parshath or Hades or Jinzo, can still get us out a very good monster in that way too. So not bad. Our opponent's going to start with a very strong opening here. Pot, Graceful, and Duo. Who says this isn't like GOAT format? People open in the Trinity. And they're going to hit the Graceful Charity out of our hand, which is really rough. We're going to discard this Painful as well, as I feel like the other cards in hand are very good. And, I mean, Painful is a very good card as well. But, yeah, I feel like that, I don't know. I think the Painful was still the right choice here. But anyways, we got a couple different options to go here. We're going to go for a Comfy, just seeing what they've got. And I believe that will go through. Yep, that will indeed go through. So we get to see that they have, oh wow, a very, very strong hand here. Mirror Force, Reborn, Harpies, and Exiled Force. The Exiled Force will be able to deal with our Gravekeepers Spy, which is very unfortunate. So I don't really want to set that. Although, if they do use Exiled on Gravekeepers Spy, they still can't attack in with the Zumbira, but they could Reborn the Yata Loop, which would be pretty unfortunate for us. So I don't think we can actually do that. So yeah, I think the move might be, we're going to take Reborn just to prevent them from getting Zalug. And yeah, we're going to bring out this Injection Fairy Lily and get aggressive that way. Without the Reborn, maybe it was fine just to set the Spy, use it for a 1-for-1 trade with the Exiled. We figure they have to trade the Exiled here. And so, yeah, after the Exiled's gone, Spy will be a pretty good wall, especially given that they've gone through 2 Zombiras and they don't have the access to their Reborn anymore. So I feel good about that. Our opponent's going to go for an Exile here, pop the Lily, pass back to us. We're just going to set the Spy, pass back to them. We know about the Harpies in hand, so we don't really want to play into that. They're going to knock our Spy, which is very unfortunate here. And we draw Sanya, which is very, very nice. We're going to bring that out, hit in for 1,000 points of damage, dropping them down to 4,700, pass back to them. And they're going to go for a Gearfried here. Kind of unfortunate because that cannot be Snatch Shield, which will be kind of rough for us. We're going to get a Serpent, though, as that can be meted. and metaing their Gear Freed seems pretty good here. So we're going to set this Serpent, fire a Metamorphosis here, bring out a Thousand Eyes Restrict. And there was a bit of like a missequencing here because neither of us really understood how this chain would work here. But they chain blast with chain on the Gear Freed. Now, the way that you want to do this, if you find yourself in this sort of situation, is when your opponent activates the Metamorphosis, that's when you want to fire blast with chain. Because if blast with chain is popped when equipping the Gear Freed, it will then resolve after the chain finishes resolving. So then it will be able to pop the Thousand Eyes Restrict when that comes out. If you chain blast with chain to the Thousand Eyes Restrict effect, then the Thousand Eyes Restrict will be able to suck up the Gear Freed, and the blast with chain will not be able to equip, so it won't actually be able to get off its destruction effect. So it won't actually work that way if you chain it at this point. But yeah, you should just be able to chain it to the Metamorphosis. So I think this is fine either way. Either way, like the result would basically be the same here. So yeah, the Thousand Eyes Restrict would get popped here. We're gonna go for a Raigeki on the Gear Freed just to clear it, and then just pass back to our opponent. They're going to bring out Wang Hu, hit in for 1,700 here, dropping us down to 2,500. They're then going to set one, pass back to us. We got MST, so that's not the worst here, but I think that just playing the Snatch Steal is something we can do, but I don't really think that it makes sense to do that here, because we know about the Harpies, so we don't really want to do that, but I guess we're doing it anyways. I guess this forces them to use up the Harpies, so there's that, but it's kind of awkward. I feel like this was a bit of a misplay, and I should have just sort of bided my time a little bit more. They're going to go for the Harpies. We're going to go for the MST on the set, which is the Mirror Force there. So we get a nice sort of like 2-for-2 trade there. They're just going to hit in to the Serpent on the Wang Hu. We get back the Serpent. But, you know, this is what I was mentioning earlier. The Metamorphosis plus Serpent play here is not really that good into Wang Hu, as the Thousand Eyes Trick would just get destroyed. So, kind of unfortunate here. Our opponent's going to flip summon a Witch, which will get around Wang Hu's effect there. And they'll hit into what they know is the Serpent, and then hit in for 17. We're in a really rough spot here. We draw Call, which isn't the best here when we have no monsters that we can actually bring out. And in a way that actually dodges around Wang Hu. If we drew this last turn, then we'd be in a different spot, because we could have called the Haunted back as Sangan, searched out Fiber Jar, and gone for that play. But as is, this will indeed be just the end of the game, because we don't have anything that we can actually do with this. But yeah, we'll just play it out. They hit in, and then they hit in, and that will indeed be all she wrote. So that was the first game that I played with Paolo. We had so much fun that we wanted to play another, though. So let's dive into that rematch now. Okay, we've got the rematch against Paolo NS. This would happen right after our first match, so we both know what each other are playing. So we are on the Goat Control deck, they're on the Warrior deck, and this is a pretty good opening hand here, honestly. We are just going to set these spies, set a Mirror Force, pass back to them. We can potentially tribute over a spy that we bring out next turn, and they will not be able to clear this with the Jinzo. We'll get out another spy here. And I feel very good about this. Jinzo will shut off any blast with chain shenanigans. So that's very, very nice. Oh, and a duo on top of that. Wow, this is just really, really good for us. We're going to hit in with the Jinzo, attack in for an additional 1,200 off the spy. There is a bit of a risk of Zalug, I guess, off the top, hitting into spy, discarding a card from our hand. But I'm not too worried about that, as we still have a very, very commanding board presence here either way. So we're going to do that. And then we're actually just going to pass back to them. We do have Painful in hand, and you might be wondering why I'm not firing it now. I think we're in a good enough spot where we don't need to fire Painful now. We can save Painful for later when we potentially need to get a card from deck to actually finish off our opponent here. So they're going to go for a Kaiku, hit into the spy. That's really good for them, as they can banish the additional spy in graveyard. They pass back to us. Parshath is very good here, but unfortunately, we don't really want to get rid of our Jinzo to bring it out. So what we're actually going to do here is just set this Reaper and pass back to them. They're going to go for a confiscation here, get rid of the Parshath in hand, which is unfortunate because next turn we actually would have been able to win, because we could have brought out Parshath, Metamorphosis it away to bring out like Dark Balter, and that would be exact lethal here. But as is, we won't quite be able to do that. But we do actually have lethal here with the Painful Choice. And you'll see why here. So first off, we're just going to send some fun-ofs that win us the game here either way. But we actually win just if we have a decently sized monster. And you might be wondering why. and this will hopefully show you in a second. We're going to bring out the Spy. We're going to Metamorphosis away the Spirit Reaper and bring out Dragonus, the Wicked Knight. And 1200 plus 1200 plus Jinzo actually does equal lethal damage for our opponent. And that shows the importance of having Dragonus in your extra deck for just these edge cases. Same with Darkfire Dragon. They might not come up all the time, but when they do come up, you definitely want to have them here. And unfortunately, our opponent just had 2 traps that would not do anything against this board. So that's going to be game 1, and really, really good showing for the deck in game 1. Happy that we actually got to show off meta there, and happy that it let us win the game. So very, very cool game there. Although you could argue that the game was won just by the Jinzo instead. But we are going to go into game 2 here, and I think the siding turned out pretty similar to how it was before. Our opponent's going to go for a Confiscation here, discarding a Painful Choice, probably the best card they would... Oh, wow. And a Sangan, sent back with Forceful on top of that, but yeah, very good for our opponent to do that. They're just going to set 1 pass back to us. We know that that is not something we want to exile because they know about the exiled in hand. So we're just going to set this Reaper, pass back to them, and they're going to fire Dark Hole, clearing our Reaper and clearing the Serpent. They're going to hit in for 300 off their Reaper, and they're going to hit a card out of our hand. They hit Mystical Space Typhoon, which is honestly the best for us to see, I think, here. We're going to bring out the Exiled Force, pop that Reaper, and then just set this TT pass back to them. They are going to add back this Serpent in standby phase, and then they're going to fire a Feather Duster on the TT. He misclicked and added it back to hand, which can happen in these games. When that happens, always be sure to ask your opponent if they want to see your logs to know that it actually was the card that got sent from field to hand. But our opponent was cool with it, and, you know, this video is proof that it actually was the card that we had set, so we didn't actually cheat. But our opponent's going to bring out a Sangan here, and we cannot Raigeki that. So we're just going to set this Raigeki, pass back to them. They've got Pot of Greed, really good here. We are down really bad in terms of card advantage. Pro's going to bring out a Wanghu on top of that, and that could potentially have been something that we wanted to... Oh, no, we don't have TT. But that's potentially something for us to Raigeki next turn. Oh, that meta brick. Oh, that hurts. We're going to fire this Raigeki, clear their field. They're going to grab a Witch. We'll just set this meta as a bluff. They're going to bring out Witch and attack in for 11. We'll take that. And they're going to pass back to us. Magician of Faith is a very good card here, as we can potentially meta that into a 1,000 Eyes Restrict. And I think that is potentially what we are going to do. So we're going to do that. Bring out the 1,000 Eyes Restrict and attack in for 1,100. Obviously not the best here, but I think we had to do that because next turn they could bring out another monster to get even more aggressive, and we're running really low on life. So just being able to shut down the game for a couple turns with 1,000 Eyes Restrict can be very good at potentially getting us back into this. So they bring out an Exiled Force and pop our Restrict, but at least that means that, you know, they won't be able to attack in for a ton of damage this turn. They grab Yata, though, which is terrifying on such a simplified board state, and this Metamorphosis will not protect us from the Yata. We just gotta hope that the bluff works, and unfortunately it does not, so they will be able to Yata lock us out of the game there, which shows the power that Yata does have in this format, even if you can't necessarily, like, pull off the instant Yata lock with CED. But we'll get to that when we get to that format. We're going to go into game 3, and I think we keep things sided largely the same. And let's see how this one goes. Very intense match so far. Both of us have kind of shut down the games in games 1 and 2 pretty quickly. But I feel like this has been a pretty good match overall. We're going to go for Confiscation here, looking at their hand. And this is a pretty good opener on their part. A lot of powerful cards that we might want to take. I think maybe the Graceful is the one to do just to prevent them from drawing more right away. But Mirage is very, very scary here. Yeah, I think we just want to... We could also take the Gearfried, as that deprives them of a monster, but Graceful will get them into a monster, so... Yeah, I think I do just take the Graceful, and we just have to play around what we know they have left. We're going to set a Witch, set a Mirror Force here, pass back to them, and that is fine by them. They're going to think about this for a bit. They're going to bring out a Gearfried here and attack into our set. Now, I have a decision to make, and I think it's probably the most important decision of the game. I could either Mirror Force their Gearfried, bring out Air Knight Parchath next turn, hit in for a draw, and then Metamorphosis into a Dark Balter, which will shut down things like Reborn and Raigeki. Or we could search out a Sinister Serpent off the Witch, and then bring out 1,000 Eyes Restrict, take control of their Gearfried, get in for 18. They've got Raigeki, but it clears the Raigeki at least, and then we can go for another Restrict play on the following turn with our other Metamorphosis in hand. I think that either of these are valid lines of play. I think in hindsight, I do like the Parshath play better because Dark Vaulter does shut off our opponent's spells, and we do know our opponent has some very powerful spells. So I think that that probably would have been the correct play. Unfortunately, I do not go for that play, and I instead just let that attack go through, bring the Serpent to hand. So they're going to go for a Mirage of Nightmare here, and they're going to then set 3 and pass back to us. We draw Imperial Order, which is pretty nice here. Our opponent is going to set or draw 4. We're going to fire a Metamorphosis here, and unfortunately, they have a Imperial Order here, which is really rough for us, as that will shut off our Metamorphosis, open ourselves up to an attack next turn, although we do have Mirror Force for that attack, so that's not the worst. And it will also shut off their Mirage discards, so that's really, really rough. I think with the Imperial Order on field, it actually would have been pretty bad either way for our sort of Air Knight Metamorphosis play. But yeah, I still think the Air Knight Metamorphosis play was the correct play to make. We would have gotten in for an extra draw, and if it actually had gone through, we would have been in a much better spot long term, I think. So yeah, I think that we did pick the wrong version of the play, but yeah, this is a really brutal punish for us either way. So we're going to set the IO of our own, and they will indeed just, let the Imperial Order lapse because they've got so many powerful spells. They're going to bring out a Zaluk here. Go for Pot of Greed. Oh my goodness. We're going to fire an Imperial Order. They've got the MSC for our order, so that will shut that off there. They'll be able to draw 2. And they'll be able to get in for 3,200 if we did not have this Mirror Force here. So we're going to Mirror Force that board away. They've got Duo, though, so they will be able to clear the last 2 cards in hand and go for a Reborn on our Parshath. So, given that, I think maybe we actually just, we're probably losing this either way. Dark Hole will potentially get us a bit out of this hole because we will be able to clear the Parshath. But yeah, I think this was going to work out pretty poorly for us either way here. We do at least get back the Serpent as well, so that chump blocks for a bit. But yeah, we're just going to set the Serpent, pass back to our opponent. They're going to go for an MST on their Mirage, and this is going to be really bad for us. They have a Wanghu, so they'll be able to hit over the Serpent. We draw a Zoo, which will be able to clear the Wanghu, and we could potentially go for that now. The reason I don't is because they've got a full back row and they could have any number of powerful traps. And as is, I don't think we're in a too bad of a spot. Like, they can get out another monster and start hitting in for more damage here. But yeah, I feel like this is a stable enough sort of play. And also, they can't actually bring out a Zalug yet because that will get popped due to Wanghu. So they can set it up on field. We don't really have to worry about losing our hand to that. But yeah, they're going to go for a change. Rhoda out a Gearfried here. And if we had actually gone for the Bazoo play, we would have been taking a fair amount of damage here. So either way, I'm not sure either play would have necessarily turned out for the best here. But yeah, we would have been in a really tough spot after either eventuality. We draw Spear Reaper, which is nice, but they probably have a Blastless Chain here. So we've just got to try attacking in before they can actually get that Blastless Chain up if they don't have it now. But I feel like they likely do. Yep, they've got the Blast. So either way here, I don't think we were actually going to be winning this one. They've got Raigeki and they've got Snatch Shield. So yeah, there was nothing we really could have done this game 3, I think. If we had gone for the other line with the Parshath, I think that would have been a little bit better. But we would have gotten punished by the same things like the Imperial Order that they drew off the top. So yeah, I think that we still misplayed here, but I don't think it would have mattered either way for the outcome of the match. But that was a really, really good game 3, I thought, for showing like how fun this deck can be, because we did have that really interesting decision point with the Mirror Force in turn 2. So I do think that that shows that this deck can be very interesting if it doesn't get like Giga sacked. But yeah, I also have some other matches with this deck to sort of show it off further. So let's dive into those and see how it does in those games. Okay, we got a match against Dump Truck here. Frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're going to be going first. And this is a really good opener. Wow. We're going to go for Pot of Greed here, drawing 2. And the opener gets better. But I think that ultimately is kind of low powered. Like, we don't really have a good way to clear 1,000 Edge Restrict if we actually do pull that off. And just saying can get us into some other stuff, but it's a bit slow. So I feel fine just going for this. And, it's not the best thing in the world, but I do think that just going for an initial Fiber Jar reset it can be pretty good. So we'll see how it goes. Our opponent's going to T-set and pass as well. We're going to fire an MST on that set just in case someone like a Solemn. They can negate our Fiber Jar. But this is pretty good. And, ooh, that's actually... Okay, this is a bit of a thinker here. Because we were initially going to Fiber Jar. But then we were thinking, well, if we bring out Hades, attack over their set, if it's something like Serpent or Sangan or Witcher set, etc., they won't get that. And also we can Comfy out another card from their hand. So I think that, actually here I'm going to switch up my game plan and actually go for the Hades instead. So we're going to go for Comfy first, I think, just to check if the Hades play is a good one. And we see a pretty decent hand on their part. Ring, Witch, Sangan, and Mirror Force are all kind of threatening. But ultimately, only the Ring really threatens the Hades directly. The others can, but, we have to, it can't just be chained to whatever. So, yeah, Mirror Force is a bit of an issue, but I feel like this is ultimately still fine. We're going to go for the Hades play here, hit over their set, and we're just going to pass back to them. Worst case scenario, we can meta into, Senshi to shut off their traps. Then we don't have Hades, but at least it blanks their Mirror Force. Oof, that Graceful is going to be pretty rough here. They're going to pitch 2, the Sangan and the TT. They're going to go for Pot as well, and they're going to end it on a Painful. That's really good there. Quite unfortunate. We don't really want to give them the hand rips. Yata and Zalug are kind of rough. But I guess we will give them Duo because Duo into Serpent isn't the best here. So I think it's ultimately fine. Not the best, but yeah, probably better than the Zalug or the Yata. They're going to hit Dark Hole. That's really unfortunate. But we do have the Serpent here. And then they're going to bring out a Snatch Steal and attack in for 3550. That is over half our life points. We're in a bit of a tough spot. They're going to set 1 and fire Mirage as well. Really unfortunate here. Oh, but Harpies. Oh, Harpies is arguably one of the best cards we could have gotten here, actually. We grab back the Serpent, and we gain 1,000. And then they will be able to draw 4 off the Mirage, which is unfortunate. And they will be able to keep this 4 cards that they draw because, we are harping away the Mirage. But I think this is ultimately still a pretty good plan here. We can hit over their Sangan, or the Witch with the Hades and hit in with Sangan for an additional 1,000 here. And they may have 4 cards in hand, but, I still feel like this is a very good board to have set up. Opponent's going to fire Dark Hole, unfortunately, and dismantle that board right away. Luckily, we will be able to get a search off that, and we'll search out a Witch of the Black Forest. They're going to bring out a Gemini Elf here, hit in for 1,900, which is kind of unfortunate. They're going to set 1, pass back to us, and Spy is a pretty good one. We could just go for the 1,000 Strict play here instead. Looks like that is what we're going to do. And they are going to be fine with that. I think that's a little bit risky. If they had Imperial Lore, we would have been in a pretty tough spot. But since it does go through, it's not the worst here. We will be able to hit in for 1,900. We know that Ring is gone. We know the Mirror Force is gone. So I feel decently about this. They do have Raigeki to clear that. And then they're just going to set 2, pass back to us. Imperial Lore is a decent draw here. And now I think we've got the advantage here. So we're going to set the Spy, set the order. Unfortunately, they do have an MST to get rid of that. And they will Change of Heart our set, which is a Spy, which will allow them to get... this isn't... Oh, yeah, this is lethal. Yeah. So, kind of unfortunate. Maybe we should have set the Witch to play around Change of Heart a little bit. But I figured with the IO, the Change of Heart threat wasn't that big. But I guess they hadn't really used up too many MSTs. Maybe we could have played this differently in the end here. Maybe we also should have just gone for the Fiber Jar flip earlier on in the game. But I got a bit greedy with the Hades. So, yeah, that might have cost us the game there. But I do think that flipping up Fiber Jar early would have been potentially pretty good. But anyways, we are going to go into game 2 here. And we saw that they were on a bit more flip monsters. So I think we did bring in a knock. I think we might have decided out Yata for that, maybe. But we'll have to see. We're going to start with a Forceful Sentry, see what they're working with here. And that's a pretty decent hand, but if we take away the Jinzo, it isn't that bad. Or I guess they don't really have a good way to get Jinzo engraved. So the MST is probably better, because then also, they can't use it on the IO. So, yeah, I guess we are just going to send back the MST. And then, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that play, but we'll just set the Sangan, Mirror Force, and Imperial Order, pass back to them. And they are going to go for Raigeki on the Sangan. We're fine with that. We can save the IO for something a bit better because we do get a search off this. They're going to set 1. we're going to think about exactly what to do here. We're going to go for this Graceful Charity here. And we're actually going to pitch a Fiber Jar and call because I want to get rid of their set so that way they can't tribute out of Jinzo. So I figure that I'll go for the Serpent meta play here. And also we've got Yata Grasu for follow-up later on to potentially Yata lock them. And so I feel pretty good about this. So we will be able to take their set, which is a Fiber Jar. So I feel pretty good about taking that. And they're going to set one pass back to us. Mirage is a pretty good draw here. And we are just going to set a Witch, fire the Mirage, pass back to them. Standby phase, we will be able to draw 2 cards here. So, oh, those are pretty good ones. Our opponent's going to Dark Hole the board, but we will get a search off this Witch here. And we will grab a Spirit Reaper, which is pretty good. Our opponent's going to go for a Rhoda, and now we're actually going to think about whether we want to IO that. We are just going to let that go through, so that's ultimately fine. They're going to bring out a Zelu, but we've got Mirror Force for that. They're going to bring out the Dontalu there. Attack in for 1400. We are just going to fire this Mirror Force, clear that, and they'll pass back to us. Now, we could potentially go for the IO here to shut off the Mirage, but we've got Serpent. We're only discarding 2 cards here, so I think ultimately this is pretty fine. Or I guess we do just go for it anyways. I don't know if I would have done that, but I guess we've got this Yata here, so we want to make sure we keep the Yata. Opponent's going to fire Mirror Force, and we'll pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Zelu here. They will be able to hit in for one of our cards, which is a bit unfortunate. They're going to hit the Exiled Force, which is kind of rough, but not the worst thing in the world. We will draw in here. We will let the Imperial Order lapse, because I do think we've got a pretty great hand here. We're going to duo the remaining 2 cards away. We're going to just set a Spy, set a Change, and set a Raigeki, pass back to them. So then we'll be drawing 2 cards off this Mirage. Plays a little bit into Harpy's Feather Duster here, but I figure we're kind of equalizing that off of our draws. They're going to knock our set, which is very unfortunate here. We'll lose all of our Spies. It looks like our opponent doesn't have any Spies left in deck. They're going to hit in for 1400 and pitch a card from our hand. They luckily hit the Serpent, but ultimately I think that we would have been fine no matter what they hit there. But we will be, we make actually a major misplay here, so that's good to note. We should have added back the Serpent before we discarded for Mirage. But yeah, I mean, we made that misplay. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, because I do think that we do manage to lock down the game from this point, but it is good to note that we should add back Serpent before Mirage, and then we can add it back after as well. So we're going to hit in for 14 off this 1,900 Strict that we brought out off the Metamorphosis, and I'm feeling pretty good about this. We draw to 4 off the Mirage, and they're going to then fire this duo that they've got in hand. So this will cause us to discard our entire hand if we don't have a way to deal with that Mirage. But ultimately, they dropped down 1,000. We've still got the 1,100 Strict on field hitting in, so it's not the worst thing in the world. And we add back the Sinister. Oh, actually, this won't be everything, I don't think, because we only drew 3. So, okay, so it's not everything. But it is a fair amount. So now we'll add back the Serpent here. We're going to hit in for 1400 off that Restrict, and we'll pass back to them. And I feel like we've locked down the game like pretty well here. We're going to draw 2 off the Mirage. They're going to just set 1 pass back to us. We're going to MST the Mirage, because I think I do just have the game on lock here. Because, or it's not quite on lock. It's almost the end of the game here. We are just going to fire Raigeki, clear their set, and then hit in for 14 off of this Restrict here. Because then next turn we can do a Dark Hole play, bring out Injection Fairy Lily, and hit in for the remainder of their life points. So we also got Change of Heart set up as our other back row, which is pretty nice. They do have Graceful, and if anything is going to get them out of this, it is a Graceful here. But I don't think there is much that can actually deal with what we've got set up. Opponent's just going to set 1 pass back to us. We're going to fire Dark Hole here, clearing the entire board away and letting us bring out a Lily and get in for lethal damage. So that will be the end of the game there. And I think that was a pretty good showing for Goat Control here. Now, of course, you know, you can't really do much with your 1,000 Restrict once it's on the field, but sometimes that is enough, as we saw there. Just having a 1,000 Restrict on field, attacking in every turn, was pretty good. I mean, Mirage helped as well because we were able to draw deeper into our deck and get other stuff. But I think it still was a very good sort of board state, and it worked out really well for us. So let's go into game 3 here and see how we actually do here. So this is a really good hand again. We've been drawing some pretty good ones each time. Our opponent's going to go for a Graceful Charity, drawing 3, discarding 2, and summon out a Gemini Elf, set 2 back row, and pass back to us. We draw Fiber Jar, which is pretty nice. We're going to think about exactly what to do here, but we are going to fire the Painful. They do have IO for that, so we're just going to set this Fiber Jar, set a Reborn, and pass back to them. Now, it's kind of rough if they have a way to deal with the Fiber Jar here, but it looks like they're going to keep IO on the field, so that means that they likely don't have many. It looks like they indeed are just going to trigger this Fiber Jar, so we'll shuffle everything back into the deck. We've gotten 700 life points in on them, and also we will be drawing next turn as well, having the advantage there, having a battle phase, so this looks like a pretty good start for us. Now, they could potentially draw hand rips to make things a bit worse for us here, but ultimately it isn't that bad. They're going to fire a reinforcement in the army now, grabbing Exiled Force, set 2, pass back to us. We draw a Pot of Greed, which is very good. We're just going to fire that. We've got the MST for the IO insurance there. And wow, this is a really good hand here. We're just going to set a tomato, set an MST and a ring, and pass back to them. This does play a little bit into Harpies. If they had set the Harpies last turn, then that's kind of unfortunate. We go 2 for 1. But ultimately it isn't bad. If they fire Harpies from hand, then we've got the MST on their set, so we can make it a 2 for 2 trade. Right now they've got Change of Heart. So they're just going to get aggressive here and try and rip a card out of our hand, which I think does make sense from their perspective. However, we do have a ring to get rid of the Yata Loop to prevent a card from getting ripped. So they're going to hit in for 1,400 off that tomato, and then they're just going to set one, give it back. We feel very good about this. We're going to fire Harpies because I think I do pretty much have this game wrapped up if we can get a Yata to stick. But instead we go for a Lily, and this may seem a bit weird because we do have this Yata to set up the Yata lock here. But the way I figured is that, like, Injection Fairy Lily plus Tomato is basically a 2-turn clock either way. And there isn't really much that our opponent can draw to really out this convincingly. If they just set a monster next turn and we fire Injection Fairy Lily into their set, then we should have enough damage to kill them off the Tomato. And if they have like a big board clear here, we do have Yata to set up the lock that way. And also just getting them very low prevents any lilies of their own, prevents them from taking full use of our lily if they take control of it. So I think this is probably the correct play here over the Yata lock. Even though it's very tempting to Yata lock, you always want to do it because you are in Yata format, and Yata locking is so fun. But I do think that this is the correct play. Our opponent's just going to set 2, pass back to us. We're just going to fire MST in the end phase there, and they're going to lose the confiscation here. We feel very good about that because this should pretty much be the end of the game unless they've got like a Cyber Jar or something set. We're just going to hit in with Injection Fairy Lily. Or I guess Fiber Jar could also potentially make it not the end of the game. But if it is Fiber Jar, you know, they're down to 1,100, so we feel pretty good about that. But it looks like that will indeed be the end of the game. It looks like they had a Magician of Faith set and the Exiled Force we knew about in hand. So very good showing for this deck in this match here. Although, you know, we only really got to use the Metamorphosis combo in game 2, but it worked out really well for us there. We've got one more game to show off with this deck, so let's dive into that now, because I think that last one is also a really fun game. Okay, we've got a game against Soul 65 to finish things out here, and this is a pretty good game because Soul 65 is one of these sort of innovators of Goat Control in Yata format, at least on my Discord, which, you know, if you want to play any of the formats that I play in these videos for yourself, definitely head on over there. It's a great place to find games and just discuss these things in general. But Soul 65 is someone who's put like the most effort into working on Goat Control a bit here. And yeah, so we are going to play against the creator of this deck, kind of. Although I think my version is a little bit different from theirs. But it's exciting to see, and I'm glad that we got to show it off in this video. So we open with a pretty decent hand, but our opponent opens with a Pot of Greed, which is kind of rough for us. They're going to set 3 and pass. We've got double MST in case we do want to make like a super aggressive push here, but I don't think we really need to yet. We can just set this Witch. They'll set another as well. We draw Charity, which is pretty nice. We're just going to fire that, see what they do here. If they've got IO, we've got MST, and we will indeed go for that. So we'll be able to draw 3 here, and we draw into Serpent. Wow. That's what I call luck. We're going to pitch the Serpent and the Tomato, figuring that we can just go for a meta play next turn if we want to. But we're also, we've got no real way to set up meta like profitably for us, but at least it deprives them of a monster there. So I think we might actually do that. We're thinking here for sure. No, we don't actually do that this turn. We just set this as Serpent, pass back to them. I feel like we're in a pretty decent spot. And then if they do have a threatening monster that they bring out next turn, then we can use the Serpent with meta to deal with it that way. So I think ultimately this is fine. Our opponent's going to go for a painful choice here, sending a fair bit. We're going to send a Forceful Coffee, a Dark Hole, a Hades, and a Change of Heart. Wow, that hot S is really threatening for our plans because they hot S into Serpent. We don't get it back, and then we can't really pull off a meta play with that. So I don't think we want to give them hot S. So we're actually going to give them Change of Heart here. We don't really have anything that's really worth changing, and if they do ever Change of Heart or like Thousand Eyes, it's honestly not the worst for us because Thousand Eyes will likely have pretty low attack. They're going to flip up this Giant Germ here. Change of Heart our first set, which is a Witch Black Forest, and then hit in for a fair bit of damage. But that's ultimately fine. You know, they're not really doing much besides this. And now we can go for our meta play into Thousand Eyes Restrict if we want to. We've also got Dark Hole. Clear the board that way, get a search off Witch. And that actually might be the better of the two options. Instead, we're going to go for Exiled Force here. I think, honestly, the Dark Hole might have been a better play. But I guess this way we still have Dark Hole for later. So it's good in that regard. So our opponent's going to set one, pass back to us. And now we're going to fire Dark Hole. And I think that's pretty good here. We do get a search off the Witch as well. So we're going to grab a Parshath here. Bit of an interesting choice, but I figured this won't be the hardest thing to get out. And it will be pretty good for a Metamorphosis. It will be pretty good hitting into things like Giant Germ. So yeah, I feel like it's a decent choice. Our opponent's going to fire Ring on our Spirit Reaper though, and that will deprive us of that. But we do have a Call of the Haunted, bring in a monster next turn as tribute for our Parshath. So they are going to set one, pass back to us, and we draw Raigeki, which is pretty good. We are just going to fire an MST on their new set here. It's a TT, so I feel very good about that. The reason why we did this is we want to insulate our Parshath play if we want to go for that. And I think I would like to go for that this turn. So we're going to target Witch here. Unfortunately, they do have an MST to deal with that, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so maybe I got a little bit greedy here. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. But I don't know. I think it was fine. Our opponent's not doing anything, which means that they likely have bricked if they're playing like a full-on Fiend deck, which seems like they might be. And again, we've got the Metamorphosis plus Sinister Serpent combo later. We actually set a Metamorphosis as a bluff because we have so many of them, so we don't really need to worry about it baiting out an MST. Opponent's going to go for a Graceful here, which is kind of unfortunate for us. They're going to pitch a Necrofear and a Geroid here, which is kind of interesting because they could have actually brought out Necrofear here if they so wished. But it looks like they're going to make a pretty aggressive play here. They're going to bring out Reaper, which is really rough for us. They're going to be able to pitch a card out of our hand here. And they missed the die roll a couple times. In general, like, you can just, once your opponent shuffled up their hand, you can just pick one randomly. And that will do effectively the same thing as a die roll. So if it is, like, costing you a couple minutes, or, well, if it's costing you a couple minutes, definitely just pick it randomly. But if it's costing you a couple die rolls, then definitely just go for just picking randomly. And we're just going to go for the Thousand Eyes Restrict play here because it's pretty neat. We target the Reaper, and I'm actually not sure if this actually will give us the Reaper before Reaper destroys itself, but we actually looked into this, and in GOAT format, they do have rulings saying that Reaper will actually become an equip target here, which makes sense because after it's been equipped, it won't be a monster on field with its normal effect. So it won't actually be able to destroy itself that way. So yeah, we're just going to take control of it, get it in for 300. Even if we hadn't taken control of it as an equip, I think we still would have been pretty fine here. We're going to add back this Serpent. We are going to go for, I think we could go for a Harpy's Feather Duster play here, bring out Parshath draw. That might be the move. But it looks like we're just going to hit in for 300 here. We don't necessarily want to commit to that. We're just going to set a Sinister Serpent, set a Mirage Nightmare here, and pass back to them. We don't need to activate Mirage Nightmare since our hand is pretty stacked already. So I feel pretty good about this. And they are going to set one, pass back to us. We feel fine about that. We've got Harpies for when we want to go for a game shot here. We're going to go for Pot of Greed here, draw two, and this is a really good hand here. And I actually kind of misplayed last turn. I think I should have set the Lily instead of setting the Serpent here. Because if I had set the Lily, then we would have been able to get a game shot this turn. Because we could have been able to tribute off the Thousand Eyes for an Air Knight after doing this Harpies. And then gotten in with Lily, Parshath, and also Reborn Backswimming to deal that last bit of damage. So, yeah. We're going to Harpies this board. They're going to actually chain a Call of the Haunted to bring back Dark Geroid. Which will indeed get its effect, I believe, because it is summoned. So it will target our Restrict, dropping it down to 0, which is fine by us. We weren't really going to use that for attacking anymore anyways. We're just going to bring out a Parshath, get in for 2200. And, you know, again, if we had committed Lily to field earlier, we could have actually gotten in for lethal damage this turn. As is, I think that this is ultimately going to be fine. I mean, we draw Forceful off the top of our Parshath draw, so that's very, very nice. We're going to Parshath, see what they've got, and this is a pretty decent hand for them. I think of these, we might want to go for the Reborn. Like, if they bring out Necrofear, we honestly don't care too much about that. Then again, what are they reborning that's actually an issue here? So maybe we... I don't know, a bit iffy. I think either way, we've got Change of Heart, so we're going to be fine here. But yeah, we're going to send the Reborn just in case. Just in case that a line we don't necessarily see. And I do think we're in a really good spot, given their hand of just MST and Necrofear. They're going to bring out Exiled, pop our Serpent here, which is kind of interesting. I'm not exactly sure why they popped the Serpent. I think what they could have done here is essentially summoned out Exiled, attacked into Serpent, then popped the Parshath. I don't quite get this play, but either way, we should be able to wrap it up here. We're going to Reborn back the Parshath, and that will indeed be fine. We're going to Change of Heart this Necrofear and get in for lethal damage if this actually connects. And it looks like it will indeed connect. They're just going to MST for the information. See that we have the Mirage Nightmare set, and that will indeed be the end of the game. So I think that this showed how powerful the Goat Control deck can be when it actually does go well for it. You know, our opponent was playing a deck that looked like it might have bricked, so I mean, if they had the tools to punish us earlier in the game, then maybe we wouldn't have done so well there. But I think that this does show that if you are able to late game have all your cards together, you're able to pull off some very powerful plays. So I felt pretty good about that one. I think we side in a Kaiku here because that deals with Necrofear pretty well. Our opponent's going to start with a Delinquent Duo, and you know, once it's randomized, you don't really need to roll the dice that much, but they hit Pot of Creep, which is really, really rough for us here. Oof, unfortunate. And then they will go for these Forceful. So we got kind of lucky here that they went for this order, and maybe this is, you know, an argument to go for Forceful then Duo. But if they hadn't hit the pot here, that would have been really bad for them, as we would have been able to recoup the advantage. So I don't actually know. I think it might have been better here to actually do it in this order despite hitting the Serpent. But who's to say? They've got a Painful as well, just to get another card to hand here, which is kind of rough. We're going to give them the Geroid, as we don't really care too much about Geroid. It's kind of weak, and if you summon it out on its own, it has to target itself. So that's kind of funny. They're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Knock, which is really nice here. And we're going to go for a Sinister Serpent, knocking their Germ, and then just hit in for 300 here. We could have potentially reborned back the Jinzo, but I think I'm saving that for later when we can get more value off of it. Also, if they've got to call the Haunted set, then that'd be really bad to Fire Reborn. They chain call, and that'd be really bad for us. They're going to bring out that Geroid, drop our Serpent down to 0 attack, hit in for 1200 here, and then pass back to us. We get back our Sinister Serpent here. So now I feel comfortable going for the Monster Reborn play because we do have the call, but instead we're just going to go for the Thousand Eyes Restrict play here. We've got MST to potentially take control of another monster, but they've got TT here either way, so it won't actually end up mattering. So now that they've done that, I'm actually going to go for the Reborn play here, targeting Jinzo, just bring it back, getting in for a ton of damage here. I think if I'd done this before, it honestly would have been better. I think I should have done just Reborn, bring back Jinzo, and, you know, have MST for the set if it's like call. But I guess there wasn't really anything else I was committing to board at that point, so, I don't know. I think this is ultimately fine. This plays around Snap Steal a little bit better, I guess. We do have the MST. They're going to bring out a Mr. Tomato here, Raigeki, the Jinzo, and hit in for 14. Kind of rough. We will get Serpent back, though, so that will potentially protect us for a couple turns. And we draw Mirror Force, which is very nice. We're just going to set Serpent, set Mirror Force, pass back to them. They've got Harpies, that's obviously very unfortunate for us. But I think that getting rid of a Tomato here is very good. So we would just like, you know, to have it here in case they don't draw the Harpies. So they're going to pitch a Germ and a Tomato, bring out a Yatagarasu, and this is why I'm very glad that I set the Mirror Force here. We're just going to fire that Mirror Force, clear their board, and prevent the Yata Lock from coming down. We draw Call of the Haunted, which is very nice here, although we don't really have that many monsters in Grave to make use of it. We're just going to hit in for 300 here. And then main 2, we're actually just going to pass. We don't need to commit Call of the Haunted yet, as again, there's not really anything that we want to bring out. Because the Thousand Eyes Restrict was not properly summoned, so I don't think we'll be able to bring it back. But yeah, they're going to just set a random monster that we don't know about and just end their turn. And we're just going to play as if we don't know what that was. They misclicked. And so I feel like it's better just to play as if we don't know what it is. Either way, we wouldn't be attacking with Serpent here. I mean, if we knew it was Fiber Jar, maybe we should have just attacked with Serpent to sort of have the initiative there. But if we didn't know it was Serpent, or if we didn't know it was Fiber Jar, there was no way that we'd be attacking with Serpent. So we just put Serpent defense and pass back to them. They flew up Fiber Jar. What a surprise. And that'll shuffle everything back into the decks except for this one giant germ that was banished off of the Nobleman. So this will take a bit to actually process in the replay here. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we're still in a pretty good spot. I mean, they will have the initiative to bring in a monster and hit in, which is kind of unfortunate. But at 5,400 life points, I don't think there are too many ways that can come back to bite us. And they could get some hand rips in, which would be unfortunate. But I still feel like we're in a pretty good spot. Uh-oh, I forgot that Fiber Jar actually has a bug here. So if you have a fusion monster off of the Fiber Jar, I will actually shuffle it back into your main deck, which can actually come up. Now, if I drew Thousand Eyed Restrict here, I would just, put it back into the extra deck. But I mean, it's good to know about in the future because if we actually manage to deprive the last two Thousand Eyed Restricts in our extra deck and we need the third, it would be in the main deck. So, very easy to rectify after the fact, but it's something good to remember here. And it's just kind of funny that it does happen that way. So they're going to forceful send back the Fiber here, which is pretty good for them. They're going to bring out Yata, hit in for 200, which is really rough for us. And then they're just going to set 3, pass back to us. Now, given that they set 3 back row and they did forceful our hand and sent back Fiber instead of like Tomato, I figure that they probably have something to deal with Tomato if we summon it. So I don't really want to commit the Tomato there. We're going to go for Forceful. They do have a way to deal with that, which makes sense. We're going to set the Tomato here, and we're actually going to fire this Mirage of Nightmare, because now this has to basically force them to either, keep Imperial Order up and start bleeding life points faster than they can actually auto-lock us, or they have to, let it go, and then we draw 4 off the Mirage. So I feel like this is ultimately a very good choice to put them in. And let's see what they do. They're actually going to pay these 7, so we won't draw off that. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. Pot of Greed is pretty good here. I guess we could have set the pot because we got Imperial Order to deal with if they draw Harpies. And also if they do get hand rips in, that would be kind of rough to have the pot in hand. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. So yeah, and they're just going to, keep the order up on the Mirage. So won't really matter either way here. They're going to bring out Hades off the Geroid there. And this is actually really unfortunate for us. If we don't draw a way to out the Hades here, then we actually are in a lot of trouble because this will be a 2-turn clock with Yata as well. And we don't actually have a way to get out of that. So we draw Comfy, and we could actually fire the Comfy and hit the Yata. Oh, no, we couldn't because Io's up. So yeah, the only thing we can do is set the Comfy as a bluff and hope that they'll treat it as a live card and not commit the Yata and win the game. So they are going to think about this for quite a bit, and they're actually going to let the IO lapse and let us draw 3. And we draw MST, so that will be able to deal with our Mirage. So that's very, very nice for us. They're going to go for a painful choice here. We're going to fire IO. They've got the MST for that. So that's very, very rough. Oh, I guess they didn't actually have a back row that could deal with Tomato. So I guess we could have summoned that out and hit in. But I think we played as well as we could have, knowing what we knew. But anyways, they're going to be able to get 5 off this painful here. Now, if we give them the Lily, we just lose the game. We don't want to give them the MST because then they'll know our back row is a bluff. But, I mean, honestly, that's not the worst because we do have Pot of Greed plus Snatch Steal. So actually, we might give them the MST here. Germ is also not a bad thing to give them, as that doesn't really do much against us here. I think we probably give them the Germ here. Oh, wait, Germ was already in there. So, yeah, the Germ doesn't matter. So, yeah, last card will be Ring. Yeah, I think we give them MST here because Ring is the end of the game, basically. Lily is the end of the game, basically. Comfy and Duo can potentially get cards out of our hand, which we don't want to lose. So, yeah, MST is the best choice here. And we will indeed give them the MST there. So, they'll be able to know our back row is a bluff, which is a bit unfortunate here. But we've drawn into enough to actually let us win the game here. So, they're going to hit in for 2650, but that ultimately will not matter. And, yeah, we drew 3 off Mirage, so that would be what we'd be discarding here, but luckily for us, we have the MST, so we're going to Pot of Greed, just trying to draw into a monster. Ring will also do it. We're going to Snatch Steal their Hades, hit in for 2450, and then in main 2, tribute over their Hades, set this Ring, pass back to them, And we could just potentially go for game here, but if they have book, we want to sort of play around that. They fire graceful. We just gotta fire the ring and hope that they don't have book already in hand, because we know about Yata. We don't know the last card in hand, but we figure it's better to gamble on it not being book than them drawing into book. So we will just ring the Dark Ruler, and this will indeed be the end of the game, as their last card in hand was a germ, so not a book. So that will, in fact, do it. And I think maybe if they had kept the IO up, we would have lost this, because we wouldn't have been able to draw and sort of dig our way out of the hole that they had us in. But I don't think it was necessarily the worst thing for them to let the IO go. There were a lot of things they could have done there. Or, I mean, if we didn't draw what we drew, then we were losing this game a lot of the time. So I don't think it was the worst play, but that did indeed allow us to win the game. If they hadn't done that, then we would have probably lost. So that does show that this deck can lose against certain jank brews like Fiends. I don't really think the Fiends are that good in this format, and I probably won't be covering them as I covered them in the previous format. I don't think they've gotten enough to actually make them worth talking about here. But it is cool that we got to show it off on camera as sort of the opposing deck here. And I think this game definitely shows that the Goat control deck is probably like tier 2, because it can beat rogue decks like pretty handily. Especially if it just gives them time to draw into like the meta combo and things like that. So I feel like this deck is pretty good. Maybe not, tier 1, but definitely a fun thing to just sort of experiment with and tinker with, and maybe through more optimization it will become a lot better. Although breaking on metamorphoses is really, really rough and a major flaw of this deck compared to a lot of the other better decks in the format. But that's going to do it for this deck. I hope that you enjoyed this video as always. If you enjoyed the video and you like this sort of Yata gameplay, then definitely subscribe to the channel. We are almost at 850 subscribers, and I'd really like to reach 1,000 by the end of the year. That would be really, really cool. So if you enjoy this content and you're not already subscribed, definitely just hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified when I release new videos, and also when I go live, because I go live about like once a week to sort of live stream the locals that we hold on our Discord server. And if you want to join, that link is in the description down below. Also, definitely let me know what you thought of these games down in the comments below. There were a lot of them, so I expect people will have thoughts on them, and I look forward to discussing those thoughts with you as always. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.